Welcome to Curiosity, the podcast where science meets wonder. Join us as we explore the fascinating, the innovative, and the unexpected, from the secrets of the cosmos to the marvels of everyday life. Each episode takes you on a journey to uncover the knowledge and stories that fuel our endless quest for understanding. Let your curiosity guide you.
Welcome. We are diving deep today into something pretty fundamental, right? Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not really here for the poetry or the philosophy this time. You shared this amazing stack of source material with us.
Yeah, it's quite a collection.
And our mission really is simple.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pull out the facts, the measurable stuff, the things you can actually cultivate that take happiness out of just being a vague feeling and, put it into practical science.
That's absolutely right. And what's so fascinating about the sources you gathered is just how rigorous this field, positive psychology, is actually
Well, it's not just self-help anymore.
No, not at all.
Wow.
We're pulling from hard data here. Psychology, neuroscience, sociology, even economics, believe it or not.
Right.
All trying to answer that huge age-old question: what scientifically drives human flourishing?
Okay.
So yeah, the goal here is really to provide a guide for understanding well-being, not as an accident, just luck.
Right.
But as a skill, something we can actually learn and hone.
Okay, so let's start by defining our terms, because happiness itself, it's not just one thing, is it? The sources make that really clear. If we're going to study it, we need to know what we're actually talking about.
Exactly. You absolutely have to start with that key distinction between hedonia and eudaimonia.
Okay.
Hedonia. This goes back historically to early thinkers like Jeremy Bentham, the utilitarians. It's basically about maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain.
So the feel-good stuff.
Yeah, the feel-good stuff. The sort of quantitative calculation of joys that don't necessarily last, the immediate hit you get from a great meal or watching a funny movie or maybe buying something new. It's important, sure, but it's often fleeting.
Okay, so hedonia is that sensory, emotional pleasure, the quick hit.
Yeah.
Eudaimonia, though, that sounds deeper, more lasting. Goes back to Aristotle, right?
Ooh, way back. Eudaimonia is really about realizing your potential as a human being. It's rooted in Aristotle's idea of virtuous living a meaningful life. It involves growth, feeling engaged, aligning with your core values.
So purpose.
Purpose, exactly. Enduring fulfillment. It's usually harder to achieve, no doubt, but it gives you this profound sense of stability. Researchers often call this the meaning component of well-being.
So if we're trying to blend those two, the joy of the moment, the hedonia, and that deeper fulfillment, the eudaimonia, how do modern researchers put that together? Like Sonja Lyubomirsky, you mentioned her definition.
Yeah, Lyubomirsky offers a really useful synthesis. She defines happiness as, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being. That's the hedonic part. Combined with the sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. That's the eudaimonic part.
Okay. So you need both.
You really need both for a complete picture. The positive feeling, the affect, and the positive evaluation, the sense that your life has value. And the science is really about exploring how to optimize both of those.
Okay, and right away, this science starts smashing some myths, doesn't it? Especially the idea that happiness is all down to your genes or, if you just get rich enough.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the first things the source material really takes apart. They bring up this famous, almost foundational idea, the 50-40-10 split of what influences our happiness.
Okay, I've heard of this. It's pretty surprising.
It is surprising, and it's actually incredibly empowering because it really dials down the impact of our life circumstances.
All right, break down those numbers for us. What's the 50%?
Okay, so 50%, half of your baseline happiness level, seems to be down to genetics. Researchers call it the set point.
Right.
It's like your biological predisposition. It explains why some people just seem naturally more cheerful or maybe more resilient than others. It's a powerful factor, and it seems largely fixed.
Okay, so half is baked in. What about all the stuff we chase? The promotion, the bigger house, winning the lottery.
Right. Well, that's the really shocking part. That only accounts for about 10%. Just a tiny sliver.
10%.
10%. That includes your wealth, where you live, whether you're married, single, major life events, good or bad.
Wait, seriously, only 10%? I think for most people, that's stunning. We spend 90% of our energy chasing that 10%.
Exactly. And the research shows that while those things, those circumstances, they might give you a temporary boost or a dip. They don't really lock in long-term satisfaction. We adapt. Which brings us to the really empowering part.
The 40%.
The remaining 40%. This comes from our intentional activities and practices, things we consciously choose to do, ways we choose to think.
Yeah.
This part is entirely within our voluntary control. And that's the main target for positive psychology.
Wow. So that 40%, that's the actionable knowledge here. That means even if maybe you drew a shorter straw genetically, your set point is a bit lower, your choices, your deliberate actions can still significantly lift your sustained happiness.
Absolutely. It gives you agency. And, looking at that 10% slice again, the circumstances part, but on a bigger scale, like society-wide.
Yeah.
It turns out that collective action really matters there.
Right.
Think about the World Happiness Report. The countries that consistently come out on top, often the Scandinavian ones,
Right.
it's not because everyone there is super rich individually.
Right.
It's because their societies prioritize things like benevolence, strong social support systems, high levels of trust between people and institutions. Those collective choices dramatically improve that shared 10% slice for everyone living there.
Okay, that makes sense. So our individual choices matter hugely for the 40%, but our collective choices shape that 10% baseline for everyone.
Precisely.
All right, so we have this modern equation, the 50-40-10. But let's zoom out for a sec, because this whole quest for well-being, it's not new, right?
Yeah.
The sources trace this back, way back.
Oh, millennia. It's an ancient quest. You start with Greek philosophy, obviously. Aristotle laying the groundwork, making that crucial distinction between hedonia and eudaimonia we just talked about.
Yeah.
That split is still fundamental today.
And it wasn't just the Greeks, right? Eastern philosophies were deeply invested too, but maybe from a different angle.
Definitely a different angle. Thinkers like Confucius or Mencius in China, they emphasize things like moral development, self-cultivation, and really importantly, social harmony. For them, fulfillment wasn't just an individual thing. It often emerged from living virtuously within a well-functioning society.
Interesting. Okay, then fast forward a bit. The utilitarians.
Right, early modern period, you get thinkers like Bentham trying to quantify happiness, almost like a math problem. Maximize pleasure, minimize pain, calculate the utility.
Which sounds very hedonic, just the pleasure calculation, not so much the meaning part.
Exactly, pure hedonia. Then, the 20th century rolls around, and psychology takes a bit of a darker turn initially with figures like Freud.
Yeah, Freud wasn't exactly Mr. Sunshine about happiness, was he?
No, he was quite pessimistic. He saw happiness as, well, often unattainable, like a fragile truce in the constant battle between our basic desires, the id, and the rules of society, the superego. But then things started to shift mid-century with humanistic psychology, people like Abraham Maslow.
Maslow, right? The hierarchy of needs. That felt like a big change, focusing on potential, not just problems.
A huge change. He shifted the focus from just fixing what's wrong, treating deficiencies, to understanding growth.
Yeah.
His hierarchy moves from basic survival needs up towards realizing your full potential, what he called self-actualization.
Okay.
This idea that humans are driven towards growth, not just survival, was absolutely crucial. It really set the stage for what came next.
But the real turning point, the birth of the actual science we're digging into today, that came much later, didn't it? When psychology as a field decided to kind of flip its focus.
Yes, exactly. For decades, psychology was overwhelmingly focused on pathology. Treating mental illness, understanding dysfunction, studying what goes wrong. The big shift really happened around 1998.
Well, what happened then?
Martin Seligman became president of the American Psychological Association, the APA. And he used that platform to champion a whole new field, positive psychology.
He basically said, hey, shouldn't we also study what makes life good, what makes it worth living, not just what makes it miserable?
Precisely. He argued for a science of human strengths, virtues, flourishing. And he collaborated closely with another key figure, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Ah, the flow guy.
The flow guy. Csikszentmihalyi had already developed this incredibly important concept of flow, that state of being completely absorbed in an activity.
Right, where you lose track of time, self-consciousness just melts away, the challenge perfectly matches your skill. That sounds like pure eudaimonia in action.
It really is. It's like the peak experience of eudaimonia.
Yeah.
So that collaboration between Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi, leading to some foundational papers around the year 2000, that's what really launched positive psychology as a distinct empirical discipline.
And now it's a serious field.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have major research centers like at the University of Pennsylvania, the Happiness Research Institute in Denmark.
Right.
They're doing rigorous empirical studies, developing interventions, gathering hard data. It's come a long way.
Okay, speaking of empirical studies, let's dive into some of the core theories that have come out of this work. One of the most famous, maybe most challenging, is the idea of the hedonic treadmill.
Ah, yes. The hedonic treadmill, or adaptation theory, is this powerful idea that essentially our emotions tend to return to a baseline.
Like a thermostat.
Kind of, yeah. The theory suggests that no matter what happens in your life, big wins, terrible losses, you eventually adapt emotionally and drift back towards your genetic happiness set point, often within months, maybe a few years.
So this explains that tiny 10% slice for circumstances, right? You win the lottery, you feel amazing for a while, but then it becomes normal. You have a terrible accident, it's devastating, but eventually you adapt to that too.
That's the core idea. However, the source material is careful to point out this theory is actually quite controversial now.
Oh, why?
Well, while the adaptation effect is definitely real, we do get used to new things, new possessions, new situations very quickly. The research also clearly shows that lasting shifts in happiness are possible through those intentional activities, that 40%.
Oh, right. If adaptation was absolute, that 40% couldn't exist.
Exactly. So the controversy actually reinforces the importance of the 40%. It suggests you're not just stuck on this treadmill inevitably. You can learn how to actively counteract or override that adaptation process.
Okay, so how do we do that? What's the roadmap? This brings us to Seligman's other big contribution, right? The PERMA model.
Yes, PERMA is absolutely central. It's seen as the empirically validated framework for understanding and building well-being, or flourishing. It evolved from his earlier authentic happiness theory.
And PERMA is an acronym.
It is. It identifies 5 core measurable elements that contribute to a flourishing life. They're distinct, but they interact.
Okay, let's break it down. P.
P is for positive emotions. This is the hedonic part, experiencing joy, gratitude, hope, love, amusement, things that feel good. And you can measure this, looking at how often people smile, self-reported positive feelings, etc. E is for engagement. This is about experiencing flow states, being fully absorbed. You can measure this by tracking attention, looking at that balance between challenge and skill.
Yeah.
This is where self-consciousness disappears. R is for relationships. Positive, strong social connections.
Yeah.
Feeling loved, supported, valued by others. Definitely talk more about the data on this, but it's huge. M is for meaning. This is the eudaimonic core, serving something bigger than yourself. It could be a cause, a community, spirituality, family. Commitment to goals that transcend your own immediate needs.
And finally, A.
A is for accomplishment. Achieving goals, developing mastery, feeling competent. This gives you a sense of self-efficacy, the feeling that you can succeed.
What's great about PERMA, it seems, is that it gives you multiple levers to pull. Like, if you struggle with generating positive emotions, maybe you can focus on building skills and accomplishment, A, or deepening your relationships, R.
Exactly. It's multidimensional. Focusing only on P, just chasing positive feelings, that's where you risk hitting the hedonic treadmill hard. But if you focus on the more eudaimonic elements, like meaning M or engagement E, positive emotions often arise as a natural byproduct rather than being the direct goal.
That makes sense. And speaking of the function of positive emotions, there's another important theory mentioned, Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory. What does that tell us?
This theory is really profound. It explains why positive emotions are more than just pleasant fluff. Fredrickson argues they actually have a vital evolutionary function. They broaden our mindset and our range of potential actions.
How so?
Think about it. When you feel joy, you're more likely to play, to be creative. When you feel interest or curiosity, you explore, you learn. When you feel love, you connect. Negative emotions like fear or anger tend to narrow our focus, fight or flight. Positive emotions open us up.
Okay, so they make us more flexible, more open mentally. They're not just the finish line. They're a starting point for other good things.
Precisely. And here's the build part. Over time, experiencing these positive emotions repeatedly helps us build up crucial lasting resources. Things like resilience, strong social bonds, knowledge, problem-solving skills. These resources then help us cope better with future challenges.
Wow, so positive emotions are like investments, building capital for tougher times.
That's a great way to put it. They're critical long-term investments in our psychological and social toolkit, not just fleeting feelings.
Okay, so if 40% of our happiness is something we can cultivate, we need to look under the hood, right, at the biology. What's actually changing in our brains and bodies when we practice gratitude or get into flow? What are the key biological players?
Right, the biology is fascinatingly complex. It involves multiple interconnected systems. But we can start with the key neurotransmitters, the brain's chemical messengers.
The usual suspects, dopamine, serotonin.
Those are definitely major players. Dopamine is crucial for motivation and reward. It's often linked specifically to the feeling of wanting something. It drives that mesolimbic pathway, pushing you towards a goal.
Okay, the get up and go chemical.
Sort of, yeah. Then you have serotonin, which is more about mood stability, feelings of well-being, calmness. And here's a critical detail often missed. Something like 95% of your body's serotonin is actually made in your gut.
Wow, 95% in the gut.
Yep, which highlights this incredibly strong gut-brain axis connection. Your digestive health is deeply linked to your mood.
Fascinating. Okay, who else is in the mix?
Oxytocin, often called the cuddle hormone or bonding hormone. It's released during social bonding, acts of kindness, touch, trust. It fosters connection.
And endorphins.
Endorphins and other endogenous opioids. These are more linked to the feeling of liking or pleasure itself, the euphoria, the pain relief, the actual payoff when you achieve the goal that dopamine pushed you towards.
Okay, that distinction between dopamine wanting and opioids liking seems really important. It explains, well, addiction, maybe. You can desperately want something but not actually enjoy it anymore.
It's absolutely critical for understanding things like addiction or compulsive behaviors. You can have a dopamine system working overtime, intense wanting, intense craving, driving the pursuit. But the opioid system might be downregulated from overuse, meaning the actual liking, the pleasure, is minimal or gone. The drive is there, but the reward isn't.
Chasing a ghost. Okay, so where in the brain are these circuits located? Are there specific happiness hotspots?
There are key hubs. That mesolimbic pathway is central. It involves areas like the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area, VTA. These are ground zero for dopamine surges related to reward prediction.
Okay.
Then you have parts of the prefrontal cortex, like the orbitofrontal cortex. This area seems to act like a value calculator, coding how pleasant or rewarding you find something: food, music, even social interactions. Its activity correlates with how much you say you enjoy something.
And you mentioned a really critical hotspot before related to anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure.
Yes, the ventral pallidum. This seems to be a crucial final pathway for pleasure signals. The sources note that damage or disruption here can lead to profound anhedonia, a core symptom of severe depression. Understanding this spot is vital because it's becoming a target for treatments like deep brain stimulation or DBS.
But the really amazing part, connecting back to our 40%, is that this wiring isn't totally fixed, right? Our actions can change it.
That's the truly empowering insight from neuroscience. Neuroplasticity, our intentional activities that 40% translate into actual physical changes in the brain.
Like what?
Things like regular exercise, mindfulness, meditation, even practicing gratitude studies show these can literally increase gray matter density in brain regions linked to happiness, emotional regulation, and memory, like the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. It's biology reflecting our choices.
So knowing the biology can change, what are the psychological levers we can pull? The mindsets, the habits that tap into this malleable system. Where does that 40% get applied?
Okay, it really starts with mindset and conscious habits. Optimism is a huge one.
Seeing the glass half full.
It's more than just that. Optimistic people tend to expect positive outcomes, yes, which correlates with better health and longer life. But why? Partly because they tend to engage more actively in problem solving. They don't get paralyzed by setbacks as easily. They tend to see challenges as temporary and specific, not permanent and global.
And when things inevitably do go wrong, we need resilience.
Exactly. Resilience isn't about never feeling pain, it's about bouncing back. It involves having tools to reframe adversity. Things like using humor, cognitive reappraisal, looking at a situation differently, and critically, leaning on social support. These buffer the negative impact of stress.
Okay, and gratitude. You mentioned journaling. Why is that so powerful?
Gratitude works, it seems, because it's a direct cognitive counterpunch to the hedonic treadmill and to social comparison.
How?
It forces your brain to shift focus from what you lack or what others have to the abundances already present in your life. It short circuits that constant more drive, and the interventions are simple but effective, like that practice of writing down 3 good things that happened each day. Studies show this can boost happiness and reduce depressive symptoms for months, even after you stop doing it.
Wow. And flow states. Getting back to Csikszentmihalyi, why are they so key for intrinsic joy?
Because flow is the ultimate present moment anchor. When the challenge of an activity perfectly matches your skill level, you have to concentrate fully.
No room for your mind to wander.
Exactly. It bypasses that tendency towards self-conscious rumination, thinking about yourself, worrying what others think. It anchors your attention firmly on the rewarding task at hand. It's an internally generated reward. And it doesn't seem to suffer from adaptation the same way external rewards do.
Which brings us to the flip side, mind wandering. The sources say that's basically bad news for happiness.
Pretty much, yes. Landmark studies using experience sampling pinging people throughout the day found that when our minds wander, which they do a lot, we tend to be less happy.
Even if we're wandering to pleasant thoughts.
Even then, often less happy than when focused on the present activity. And frequently, where does the mind wander? To worries about the future or regrets about the past.
Right.
Mindfulness practices are the direct antidote here. They train the brain to notice when the mind has wandered and gently bring attention back to the present moment, cutting off that negative loop.
Okay, finally on the psychological side, what are the big cognitive traps the sources warn us against? The things that actively sabotage our well-being even if we're trying?
Yeah, there are 3 big ones highlighted. First, perfectionism. Setting impossibly high standards means you rarely feel satisfied, and achievement feels hollow.
Always falling short.
Always. Second, constant social comparison. Especially in the age of social media, comparing your messy reality to others' curated highlight reels is a recipe for feeling inadequate. And third, materialism. The belief that happiness comes primarily from acquiring possessions. It fuels the hedonic treadmill because the satisfaction from buying things is almost always temporary, leading you to need the next hit. Avoiding these traps is arguably just as important as cultivating the positive habits.
We've covered the internal landscape biology mindset. But happiness, fundamentally, it seems like it's a team sport, right? The evidence for social connection being crucial just seems overwhelming in the sources.
It's arguably the most consistent and powerful finding in the entire field. And this is where we have to talk about the Harvard Grant study.
Right, the really long one.
Legendary. It's been running for over 85 years now. Started tracking 268 Harvard men back in 1938 and later expanded to include their families, their offspring, just gathering incredible depth of data on their physical health, mental health, careers, relationships, everything across their entire adult lives.
85 years. So what's the single biggest takeaway after all that time? More powerful than IQ or money or career success?
The clearest message from all those decades of data is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period.
That's it.
That's the headline. Strong, warm, supportive relationships were the strongest predictor of well-being and physical health late in life, far more than cholesterol levels at midlife or wealth or fame. The quality of people's close relationships acted as a powerful buffer against life stresses and predicted longevity.
So people who had strong connections in their 50s were healthier in their 80s.
Significantly so. Regardless of their social class, IQ, or even their initial health, connection protected them.
And the flip side, loneliness.
The data on loneliness is stark. Chronic loneliness is associated with faster cognitive decline, poorer physical health, and reduced lifespan. Some studies equate its health risks to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
It's not just a feeling, it's a physiological state. Secure, high-quality connections literally seem to calm the nervous system, reduce stress hormones like cortisol. Lack of connection is a profound physical threat, not just a psychological bummer.
And what's really wild is that happiness isn't just contained within one person, right? It actually spreads.
Yeah, it's contagious. Research tracking social networks has shown that happiness can spread up to 3 degrees of separation. Meaning, if your friend becomes happier, you have a higher chance of becoming happier. If your friend's friend becomes happier, your chances still go up measurably. And even if your friend's friend's friend gets happier.
That's incredible. It really highlights the power of community well-being.
Absolutely. And it ties into pro-social behavior. Doing acts of kindness doesn't just help the recipient. It triggers what's called the helper's high, and the giver linked to endorphin and oxytocin release. We seem biologically wired to feel good when we connect and support each other. It creates these positive feedback loops within communities.
Okay, so our close relationships are paramount. What about broader context, our environment, our society? How does that play into the collective circumstance slice?
It matters quite a bit. On the environmental front, simple access to nature is consistently linked to better well-being.
Green space.
Yeah, studies show spending time in nature reduces cortisol levels, boosts mood. Even just living near urban green spaces correlates with higher reported well-being in communities. That's something potentially influenced by policy and urban planning.
And on a larger societal scale, culture, politics, how does that shape the 10%?
Well, going back to those World Happiness Report findings, egalitarian countries, those with stronger social safety nets, lower income inequality, they consistently rank higher in collective happiness.
So inequality drags everyone down.
It seems to. High income inequality tends to lower trust, increase social friction, and reduce overall well-being, not just for the poorest, but across the board. And culture matters too, in terms of what drives happiness. In highly individualistic cultures like the US, personal achievement might be a bigger driver. In more collectivist cultures, say in East Asia, social harmony, fulfilling obligations, maintaining relationships might be more central to fulfillment.
And some places are actually trying to measure this officially, right? Like Bhutan.
Bhutan is the famous example. They famously shifted from focusing solely on gross domestic product, GDP, to gross national happiness, G&H.
How does that work?
G&H measures progress based on 9 domains, grouped into 4 pillars: sustainable and equitable socioeconomic development, environmental conservation, preservation and promotion of culture, and good governance. It's a fundamental statement that well-being, in a broad sense, is a primary goal of government policy, not just a side effect of economic activity.
Okay, that's a radical shift. Now, let's get really practical. If this is a science, how do they actually measure something as slippery as happiness? And more importantly, what are those specific evidence-based actions, the 40% toolkit, that listeners can actually use?
Right. Measurement is tricky because happiness is ultimately subjective. So researchers rely heavily on self-report measures, but they use validated, carefully designed tools to try and get reliable data.
Like what?
Common ones include the Satisfaction with Life Scale, SWLS. It's very simple. Asks people to rate on a scale of 1 to 7 how much they agree with statements like, "In most ways, my life is close to my ideal." Okay, a general life evaluation.
Exactly. Then there's the Positive and Negative Affect Schedule, PANAS. This asks people to rate how frequently they've felt a range of specific positive emotions, like joyful, interested, proud. And negative emotions, like distressed, irritable, scared, over a certain period, maybe the past week. It gives a sense of emotional balance.
But self-reports, people's memories aren't perfect, right?
That's the big challenge, recall bias. We tend to remember the peaks and the endings, not the average. So the gold standard for capturing real-time feeling is the experience sampling method, ESM.
How does that work?
It involves pinging people randomly throughout their day, usually via a smartphone app, and asking them to report their mood and activity right then and there. It minimizes memory bias and gives a much more accurate picture of daily emotional life.
Clever. And sometimes they use biological markers too.
Yeah, they complement self-reports with things like measuring cortisol levels in saliva as a marker of stress, or using neuroimaging techniques like fMRI, though these are obviously much more expensive and complex to implement. Okay, so we can measure it imperfectly, perhaps, but systematically. Now, the big one, the 40%. What are the proven interventions? What can people actually do?
All right, this is where the research gets really exciting and practical. The sources highlight several evidence-based activities. Gratitude exercises. We talk about the 3 Good Things journal. Some research suggests making it even more powerful by writing down why each good thing happened. It forces deeper processing.
Okay.
Acts of kindness. Really interesting findings here. Performing acts of kindness seems to boost happiness more than doing nice things for yourself, and there might be a sweet spot. One study suggested doing 5 kind acts spread throughout 1 day per week yielded the biggest boost, perhaps by concentrating the helpers high. Using your signature strengths. First, identify your top character strengths, things like creativity, kindness, leadership, humor, perseverance. You can find online surveys for this, like the VIA survey. Then, consciously find ways to use one of those top strengths in a new way each day. Seligman's 2005 study found this significantly increased happiness and reduced depression for up to 6 months.
6 months, that's durable.
Very. Savoring techniques. This is all about counteracting adaptation by actively appreciating positive experiences, not just letting them fly by.
How do you do that? Just pay more attention.
Paying attention is part of it. But a really powerful technique mentioned is mental subtraction.
Mental subtraction.
Yeah. You take a current positive aspect of your life, say a good relationship, your health, a job you like, and you actively imagine what your life would be like without it. Spend a few minutes really considering that absence.
Ooh, that sounds kind of intense. Why does that work?
Because it forces you to break through the adaptation. We take good things for granted. By vividly imagining life without them, you compare that hypothetical negative to your actual positive reality. It makes you realize the value of what you have right now, amplifying appreciation and gratitude. It jolts you out of taking it for granted.
That makes a lot of sense. Anything else in the toolkit?
One more point on circumstances. While money itself isn't the main driver beyond a certain point, Financial security interventions for those who lack basic security are incredibly powerful. The sources mention studies showing that direct cash transfers to people living in poverty significantly reduce psychological distress and improve well-being. Reducing that constant financial stress frees up cognitive resources and provides a foundation for flourishing. It shows targeted policy can make a real difference in that 10%.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly hopeful. A real science of well-being with practical tools. But, we need to be balanced. No field is perfect. What are the major criticisms or limitations of positive psychology that the sources bring up?
That's crucial. And yes, there are significant critiques. A major one, often voiced by sociologists or those focused on social justice, is the field's potential overemphasis on individualism.
Meaning,
it can sometimes seem to put all the responsibility for happiness squarely on the individual's shoulders. Just change your thoughts, be more grateful, while potentially downplaying or ignoring huge systemic issues. Things like poverty, discrimination, lack of access to health care, political instability.
Right. If you're facing eviction, being told to savor a sunset might feel inadequate, maybe even insulting.
Exactly. The critique is that it can risk becoming a psychology of privilege, distracting from the need for broader social and political change that addresses those detrimental circumstances, that 10% slice, which can be overwhelming for some. The field needs to constantly grapple with integrating individual strategies with societal solutions.
That's a really important point. Any other major concerns?
Yes, there's the paradox we touched on earlier, the backfire effect.
Right, trying too hard to be happy can make you miserable.
Precisely. Studies show that people who place an extremely high value on achieving happiness, who constantly monitor their emotional state with that goal in mind, often end up feeling more disappointed and reporting lower well-being. Happiness is shy. It often shows up when you're focused on other things, meaning engagement, relationships, not when you're desperately chasing the feeling itself.
Okay. And methodological challenges. Still relying on self-reports.
Still a major factor. Self-reports have inherent biases. And related to the individualism critique, there are ongoing issues around cultural insensitivity.
How so?
Many of the foundational concepts and measurement tools were developed in Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, so-called weird societies. They might not fully capture or might even misinterpret what constitutes well-being in more collectivist cultures, where factors like social harmony, fulfilling obligations, or even emotional moderation might be valued more highly than exuberant positive emotion or individual accomplishment. The science is still learning to be more culturally nuanced.
Got it. So acknowledging those limitations, where is the science heading? What's the future look like?
It's moving in several exciting directions. Definitely a stronger push towards policy-focused research. How can we apply these findings to improve collective well-being at scale, addressing that individualism critique?
Using the data for social change.
Exactly. Technology is playing a bigger role, too.
Yeah.
Think AI-driven personalized interventions, maybe using wearables or apps to track mood and provide tailored suggestions in real time.
Interesting. Biologically.
Huge interest in the microbiome gut-brain axis, really digging into how our gut bacteria influence mood, inflammation, and neurotransmitter production like serotonin, could lead to dietary or probiotic interventions for mood disorders.
Wow.
And finally, continuing to bridge neuroscience and psychology. More research on targeted neuromodulation, like using deep brain stimulation, DBS, not just for movement disorders, but potentially for treating severe treatment-resistant depression by directly influencing those hedonic circuits, like the ventral pallidum we discussed. It's about getting more precise.
This has been just fascinating. We've gone from Aristotle all the way down to specific brain circuits. Let's try to wrap up the biggest takeaways for you, our listener. We've seen happiness isn't just one thing. It's that blend of pleasure, hedonia, and deeper meaning, eudaimonia. And maybe the most empowering finding is that 504-year-10 split. Genetics sets a baseline, 50%. Circumstances matter less than we think, 10%. But a huge chunk, 40%, is down to our intentional thoughts and actions.
Absolutely. We talked about the immense scientifically proven power of strong social connections. The Harvard study showing relationships trump almost everything else for long-term health and happiness.
Yeah, that was stunning.
And we covered a whole toolkit of practical, evidence-based techniques you can use, gratitude practices, acts of kindness, using your strengths, savoring, even that intense mental subtraction method.
Right. The core message seems to be, well-being isn't just luck. It's not a fixed trait you either have or don't. It's actually a set of skills. Skills you can learn, practice, and get better at, building resilience for whatever life throws your way.
Well said.
Yeah.
It's dynamic.
Okay, acknowledging that is really empowering. But let's leave you with one final thought to chew on, building on everything we've discussed. We spent a lot of time on what individuals can do, that 40% skill set. But the sources kept coming back to societal factors too, right? Things like trust, social support, low inequality being proven drivers of collective happiness, shaping that 10% circumstantial floor for everyone.
The context matters.
So here's the question for you. If we know individual actions make up 40%, and we know that 10% of circumstances is heavily shaped by our shared environment and policies,
Yeah.
what single civic or community change inspired by what we see in places like Bhutan with its GNH, or those high-trust Scandinavian societies do you think would give the biggest measurable boost to collective well-being right where you live? Beyond individual self-help, what systemic change would lift that 10% for the most people in your community?
That's definitely something worth mulling over. How do we cultivate not just our own garden, but the communal soil too?
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing these sources with us and for allowing us to take this really deep look into the science of happiness.